Beat Everyone is proud to be supported by Andrews Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center, home to the Alabama Crimson Tide team doctors and a global leader in sports medicine, research, and injury prevention. It's playoff week, Friday night in Norman, Alabama at Oklahoma. We're here, folks. Welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com. Today, we look ahead at Alabama's rematch with Oklahoma. Again, it's Friday. It's the opening round of the college football playoff, and it's another shot at the team that nearly kept them out of it a second year in a row. Today, we welcome Tom Green, who covers Oklahoma for 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports, an old friend of ours at AL.com. Tom, welcome. Good to have you.
Yeah, good to be back helping out some familiar faces over here.
Well, Tom, you're doing great work on Oklahoma, and it's really helping Alabama fans out, just sort of like figure out what they're up against again, and certainly what they faced earlier this season in what was a really tough battle. So, I mean, I wonder though, first, how do Oklahoma fans and how did this team feel about playing Alabama again? Like, Alabama fans didn't love the idea of having to play Georgia again for a second time for the SEC title game. It's obviously hard to beat a team twice in any sport, especially college football, but Alabama has really struggled during the back half of the season. So when they saw that matchup on Selection Sunday, I'm just curious what you thought the collective reaction was of the Oklahoma side.
I think there was a little bit of disappointment, again, just because it's a familiar foe and that you played, a month ago, and this will be the third time that they've played in 13 months. So I think there's a little bit of just exhaustion from that, especially after, playing an eight team SEC schedule this season. I think that they were looking forward to the idea of maybe playing a Notre Dame or a Miami in that 9 slot. And then when Alabama popped up on that screen after, not dropping following the SEC championship game, I think there was just a hint of disappointment. But at the same time, like within the program, they didn't care who really came up there. They were a little surprised it was Alabama. But they're approaching it the same way, and it's like, okay, it's a team, it's obviously a team that knows them well. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup to just see how this kind of works out with these teams being so well versed in each other these last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I was surprised too. I think everybody thought that it was going to be Alabama at Texas A&M, and when they saw Oklahoma pop up, I think that Alabama fans probably thought, oh, this is a more favorable matchup, perhaps because of how close the game was. You get another shot at a team that a lot of them thought they should have beaten in Tuscaloosa, but Alabama felt the defensive force of Oklahoma. They caused turnovers. They got to Ty Simpson. Their defense is obviously legit. They present a lot of challenges to what Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb are trying to do. Why do you think Brent Venables has had success against DeBoer and his Alabama staff so far these last couple of years?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know what it is about the specific matchup that has been favorable to Brent Venables, but the way he's built this defense, over his 4 years at Oklahoma, this is like almost like its final form. They kind of progressed each of the first few years, and now they're one of the best in the nation. And, that's a testament to, Brent Venables himself as a play caller. I think he's, pretty widely regarded as one of the preeminent defensive minds of the last quarter century. He's up there with like a Kirby Smart and obviously with a Nick Saban, those types of guys. And this year he kind of jumped back into the headset and took over play calling because that was kind of his comfort zone. And I don't know, there's something about the way that he's able to process information like at the line of scrimmage when he sees a formation and relay that really quickly that has just kind of helped this defense level up. And I think you saw that in a lot of Oklahoma's close games, both against Alabama and just kind of that stretch at the end of the season that helped them get into the playoff.
Did you see Dabo Swinney's impersonation of Brent Venables earlier this season where he said something like, what do you think they're going to run? He was like, maybe a draw or something like that. Like, was that an accurate impression of Brent Venables in your mind?
Yeah. We asked Brent about it because, he got to go back and see his son play his second to last home game at Clemson that week on the bye week. And, Brent was like, it wasn't a draw, but it was – he did kind of point something out to Dabo in that situation. And I think he was right about it too. But it was a pretty spot on impersonation. I know Brent was like, yeah, he's got me pinned down there. Yeah.
He seems like an intense guy and it shows up on the field. And he's a guy that has given Alabama trouble for many years, even when Nick Saban was obviously the head coach and he was working with Dabo. So kind of a thorn in Alabama's side in a lot of ways, and they certainly don't want that to be the case again. But what about the offense? I mean, they obviously had their own struggles this year, primarily after John Mateer suffered an injury, but they did enough to reach the playoff. What's the level of concern for the offense heading into Friday night?
I think there's obviously some level of concern. Like if Oklahoma is unable to, win a game or make a run in the playoff, it is going to probably be because of this offense, which has been improved from where it was last year, but that's a very low bar to clear considering how abysmal and dysfunctional everything was last year. But yeah, I think there's also a little bit of optimism having 3 weeks off to kind of reset. And I think that's really big for John Mateer in particular. It's been a tough season for him. He was great through that first month, especially in the wins against Michigan and Auburn. I think he completed his last 16 passes or 16 of his last 17 passes against Auburn. He was doing that with a broken thumb, essentially. But, coming back from that hand surgery in late September, 17 days removed from it, he's starting against Texas and just did not look the same. And I think he's been out of rhythm. I think he's been second guessing himself at times. He's missed some open receivers, hasn't taken the quote unquote layups that have always been there, but they've managed to come up with the timely plays when they've needed it. Like the numbers haven't been flashy by any means, but if you look back at every one of these wins down the stretch, they've come up with a big play when they've needed it. That's helped them get there. So I'm really curious to see what kind of tweaks that this offense makes, just like where Mateer is at, from a headspace perspective going into this game, having had some time to, a little bit more time to recover, a little bit more time to get into the nitty gritty of, what was going well and what was going wrong over the back half of the season. But again, I think, how far Oklahoma goes in this postseason is going to really depend on how much progress this offense can make from the end of the regular season to heading into this first round.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mateer was a preseason Heisman favorite for a lot of people, and injuries have obviously impacted the season, but he's shown flashes of brilliance. He makes a lot of plays with his legs. Look, I mean, Oklahoma didn't even need any wide receivers to beat Alabama last year, so who knows?
They didn't have any wide receivers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, they basically ran a high school offense out in Norman last year and blew out Alabama. So they're doing something right. I wonder, though, matchup-wise, because, I mean, we talked to Cole Kublet before the Oklahoma game earlier this year, and he was just singing the praises of Oklahoma's defensive line, just saying that rotation is just easily one of the best in the country. There are future NFL stars all over it, and Alabama felt that. Do you think that is another matchup advantage that they have going into this game? Is there any other area that you think gives Oklahoma any sort of leg up against Alabama in this rematch?
Yeah, I think the two areas where Oklahoma probably has the biggest advantage is that defensive line. Again, that rotation is really good. We'll see whether or not R. Mason Thomas, who's first team All SEC guy, is available. He's basically been sidelined the last month of the season after injuring his quad in that Tennessee game. I don't know if you remember the play, but he had a 71-yard fumble return for a touchdown where he was stiff arming a Tennessee tight end for about 25 yards and did it with a pulled quad. But they've managed to get by without him. The pass rush hasn't been quite as effective because they just don't have someone who's as naturally gifted as him. But the pressure's been there. They do a really good job of just limiting what the other team's offensive line can do. I think 47% of opposing teams' offensive plays this season have gone for 1 yard or fewer. Like 41% of them have been for 0 yards or a loss. So I think that the defensive line is clearly the strength of this defense. But the other area that I think Oklahoma has a pretty decisive advantage is on special teams. Obviously, we saw that kind of play out in that first matchup. Isaiah Satania had that big punt return to set up the first field goal. Tate Sandell just won the Lou Groza Award. He had 3 field goals in that game. Their punter, Grayson Miller, is an All-SEC guy. Their long snapper, Ben Anderson, is another All-SEC guy. And they've really been one of the best special teams units in the country, and that's been the difference in some of these really close games that Oklahoma's been able to pull out.
Yeah, forced a fumble on a Ryan Williams punt return in that Alabama game too.
And the blocked field goal.
Yeah, several things Alabama fans remember, and you've covered sports in Alabama before, obviously, and so you know how it works with the fan bases. Alabama fans would probably say that they gave the last game away to Oklahoma, right? That they should have won, but they played their worst game and only lost by 2. But Oklahoma capitalized on turnovers, They made life really difficult for Ty Simpson and the offensive line. So they did their part. It's why they're in the playoff and why we're getting this rematch right now. And now they're playing at home. What kind of advantage do you see home field giving Oklahoma on Friday?
Yeah, I mean, I think that crowd is going to be electric. It's been a solid crowd throughout the year, but this is going to be the biggest game since maybe in the early 2000s. I think Texas Tech came in there as a number two team. There's been some really big games against Nebraska there over the years, but this is the college football playoff. It's going to be the first home playoff game in Oklahoma history. I know that they've only been doing the on campus thing for 2 years now, but it's still kind of a monumental thing. And that they've kind of rallied behind this team, kind of adopted that Red November mindset that Oklahoma had after its second loss to Ole Miss. Their backs against the wall, just kind of been relentless down the stretch. Grimy, I think, is the word that Brent Venables has used a lot to describe this team. Should be a real exciting matchup, especially under the lights on a Friday night. All eyes are going to be on Norman, Oklahoma. I expect it to be a real special atmosphere, and I'm excited to see how this plays out.
Tom, you know that Kalen DeBoer has been in the mix for the Michigan job. At least he's a person everyone seemingly considers one of their top candidates. He had to release a statement this weekend, sort of reaffirming his commitment to Alabama, his focus on the college football playoff on Friday. Do you think that creates any sort of distraction for Alabama? Like, does the coaching carousel help Oklahoma or impact the outcome of this game at all?
I don't think it impacts the outcome of this game. I think it is obviously a storyline. It's something that the players within Alabama's program have to deal with. The coaching staff, I'm sure, has to deal with to an extent. But I mean, it happens everywhere. Throughout the season, especially during the final month of the year, we see it, and we've seen teams that have been able to kind of brush it aside. Tulane, obviously, they lost their coach and they still made the playoffs. Ole Miss, I know they took care of business before Lane officially left, but that's still something that they had to deal with over the final month of the season, really. So I don't expect it to be a huge distraction, but certainly something that has kind of garnered a lot of attention over this last week.
Well, if you want to read more about how Oklahoma covers or views Alabama, you got to go read all of Tom Green's Oklahoma coverage on 24/7 Sports, CBS Sports. Tom, we appreciate it, man. Good talking to you.
Yeah, glad to be on.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Appreciate Tom Green from 24/7 Sports giving us a little update on an insight on what to expect from the Oklahoma side of things on Friday as Alabama gets ready to play them out in Norman in the first round of the college football playoff. But, there was some news over the weekend, and it's something that we discussed on the show with Nick Kelly. Kalen DeBoer in the Michigan mix, in the apparently a top candidate in the eyes of most people outside of Alabama. And the news is he made a statement. He reaffirmed his commitment to Alabama. Here with me now, as usual, Beat Everyone producer Matt Scalici. Matt, I'm just going to read the statement that DeBoer read, and I want your thoughts on it. So he said, quote, "My family and I are very happy in Tuscaloosa and remain extremely grateful for the support of our President Mueller, Greg Byrne, and the board, so many others. We have an incredible opportunity in front of us. So my sole focus is on Alabama and our preparations to play Oklahoma in the college football playoff." He continues, "I have not spoken and have no interest in speaking with anyone else about any other job. I am fully committed to this program and look forward to continuing as the head football coach at the University of Alabama." End quote. So we heard from Kalen DeBoer. Matt, what do you think of that statement? And is it definitive enough for you? And does it totally remove him from any further speculation that he might coach anywhere else other than Alabama next year?
Yes, for next year, yes. I believe that this cycle is over for Kalen DeBoer. I will say, and first of all, I think probably most Alabama fans and people who cover Alabama as well would have said, when this whole discussion started, as soon as Sharon Moore was fired, and a handful of national media folks immediately said Kalen DeBoer was going to be a candidate for the job, I think most people who know Alabama well said it would be very, very unlikely for that to happen, but not impossible. if you're honest with yourself, right? Because nothing's impossible in college football. That said, I think it did need to have some kind of very definitive, strong statement that resolved this situation. And I think Kalen DeBoer did a good job with it. I think if you look at the language very specifically, you can find some outs, not for him taking another job, but I think that that language allows for the idea that this was actually a discussion that was being had. Kalen DeBoer saying, I haven't spoken to anyone. Well, that's not who does the speaking anyway in these kinds of situations. It's typically done by your agent. And look, there's always multiple levels to these things when they happen. The news of his candidacy in the first place may have been something that was circulated by people who represent him, because that's part of their job, is to not only get him a good job, but make it appear as though he's in high demand at all times. So I don't even want to, I think it would be a waste of our time to speculate exactly how much of that was going on, because who knows what levels those guys are operating on. But I do believe that Kalen DeBoer is committed to coaching at Alabama. I believe that also Michigan was not a job that was attractive to him.
Hmm.
I do
Oh,
not
Matt.
I do not believe that right now that is a great job. In on paper, there's a lot of good things about it, but it's a mess right now. They are in the midst of a scandal that is not going to go away as soon as they hire the next coach. It is going to be something that lingers with them for a while. And if you are at a relatively stable place, wherever you are coaching, particularly in the top echelon of college football, it doesn't make a lot of sense to want to walk into something that messy, no matter how much you're being paid.
So let's be clear. I don't want to feed speculation either. And there are probably people out there who think even talking about it after the statement feeds speculation. But having lived through the Nick Saban hire at Alabama, we all know that it ain't over till it's over.
Right.
Right. And that was certainly the case for Mal Moore in Alabama. When you want your man, you'll do everything to get your man. Now, does Kalen DeBoer's statement sound strong? Yeah, I think it does. And I think it sounded strong when he said the same thing essentially about Penn State. I believe him. I do. But if you read word for word, line for line, you're right. You could pick it apart, right? Like you could identify like little areas of wiggle room within the statement that would suggest that he's not saying something as emphatic as Nick Saban did, where he said, okay, if I need to say it, I'm not going to be the Alabama head coach, right? Because it would be silly to say something like that at this point, especially in a coaching carousel, because what if something does change? What if a situation changes, your mind changes, and that is a job that you wanted? Then the optics are obviously going to be terrible. But I think it was a carefully thought out, carefully constructed statement for him to have made. Do I think he's going to stay at Alabama? Yes, I do. And honestly, would it shock me? Like, I mean, if Alabama loses and to Oklahoma on Friday, and Michigan hasn't hired a coach yet, will those thoughts creep back into the minds of Alabama fans? Probably a little bit, but at that point, you're kind of trying to force it a little bit. And Matt, like, if you're just looking at it from a practical, which job is better, his situation versus a new situation point of view, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense unless it's just Kalen DeBoer would just rather be in Michigan or rather coach in the Big Ten and rather live in Ann Arbor as opposed to living in Tuscaloosa and coaching in the SEC, because he came here and took an impossible circumstance in the sense that it wasn't controversial. He's just following Nick Saban and what he did. And that's been the big storyline with Kalen DeBoer, that he wants to follow the greatest of all time. He embraces that challenge. But he has built something at Alabama now. He has gotten better. He is on an upward trajectory, technically. He has gone from not being in the playoff to getting to the SEC championship and earning a spot in the playoff. So things are going well in Tuscaloosa. So you're right. Why would you want to throw all that away and go build something again in a place that is a mess at the moment. So just from a practical, logical standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You never say never, as Nick Kelly said on this show last week. But right now, I mean, I don't want to even say all signs point to it. It seems like we can put it to bed, to use DeBoer's language, but I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I hate to even say that, Matt, but yeah, it seems like this is probably over, and DeBoer is here for the foreseeable future.
I think the important thing here is for us to all, and again, let's assume it's this particular chapter is over. The important thing to remember is you should never say that something could never happen in college football. And if you paid attention to it for even a couple of years, you know what a foolish thing that is to say, right? Lane Kiffin left a team that is currently in the playoffs to go coach for a team that is not in the playoffs because he thinks he will have a better chance of getting to the playoffs there. There's no, I mean, if you and I were trying to, without his own words, we're trying to make sense of that, of a move like that, that's not an argument we would make, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay. And I would say similarly, there have been other totally inexplicable, bizarre moves. I could point to Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma to go to USC, Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU. These are, coaches are not purely logical beings, and they do things for completely illogical, emotional reasons all the time. And I think this is, it's important to remember that stuff will happen sometimes in college football that doesn't make any sense, and therefore you couldn't have predicted that it was going to happen. But all that said, ultimately, I think mostly these guys want to win and they want to compete at the highest level. And there are tiny degrees of difference between the teams that are what we would call the blue blood programs, the very top of the sport. You're gonna see Michigan fans out there saying, well, they're actually not the same type of job because Michigan has a bigger NIL. First of all, anyone who tells you that doesn't know, they have no idea what Michigan's NIL fund is, and they don't know what Alabama's is either. So they're already talking out of their you know what when you hear somebody say stuff like this. But even if there was a larger NIL fund at Michigan, we're talking about a matter of degrees here. We are not talking about the difference between a group of 5 team and an SEC team. We are talking about a minor difference, and it fluctuates year to year, by the way, and it changes with things like buyout money that you're having to pay to previous coaches, or the financial ramifications of lawsuits that might result from having to fire a coach. These are not clear-cut things. I will say, I'm not saying this to cater to the Bama fan ego watching this show. There is not a program in college football that is clearly better than Alabama. There just isn't. And there that doesn't mean nobody would ever make the decision to coach somewhere other than Alabama, but it wouldn't be because there's a clear advantage in some way at another program.
That's what I mean, though, Matt, about like, where would you rather be? If you can make the same money, if the NIL situation is slightly better or largely identical to what is happening in Tuscaloosa, then it just becomes like, again, long term, I want to live here or there.
Yeah, an emotional decision, essentially.
That's right.
And so, like, I mean, look, a great example of this would be Kirby Smart, right? None of us ever expect Kirby Smart to ever leave Georgia for Alabama because he went to Georgia. He played at Georgia. That is the ultimate destination job for Kirby Smart. So I think that Kalen DeBoer has roots in that general area of the country. There's nothing that says Kalen DeBoer grew up, dyed in the wool Michigan fan. It's the thing he cares the most about. He would potentially throw his whole career away for the chance to coach at Michigan. It's I think there are rare cases that are like that, but you're not generally going to see a guy leave one of these premier programs for another premier program. And if they do, it's probably because of something sort of personal and weird that's going on internally.
Right. Well, something that's insane that's happening externally is the mess at Michigan
Right.
that you mentioned. So again, like, why would you want to step into that situation where he's not obviously connected to that, and who knows how it would ultimately impact the new head coach, whomever it is. But I just still, I'm with you. I just don't understand. Like, you have all these people saying that Alabama is one of the best jobs in the country, and like you said, if not the best job in the country, Kalen DeBoer already has it, right? So, and he's built it. He's in the playoff. So it just doesn't make like competitive sense, because, like you said, he and these other coaches, they want to do this at the highest level. He's there, and I think that everybody understands like how competitive the SEC is, and if you can succeed as the head coach and win the SEC and win a national championship while being the Alabama coach, then that's the pinnacle of college football. Now, is the same true if you go to Michigan and win the Big Ten, where that's a conference that has a lot of great programs and they win a lot of championships too? That's up to interpretation, I guess. But I think most people think that the SEC is the best conference in college football. But I don't know. I don't really see it. I think DeBoer. I get the feeling that he's happy here. I believe DeBoer. I don't think he's the kind of guy where you have to like really read between the lines with what he says. I think he says what he thinks, how he feels. If he hates it here, you wouldn't know it, right? Like, because he hasn't expressed it. His body language is usually,
as we've said before, he doesn't express much either direction. He's not a super expressive guy.
I think that if there were like backroom dealings and he was like a mastermind in terms of his own exit from this place where he's trying to like credibly make a name for himself and a legacy for himself, I think that would shock a lot of people. Now, we've been shocked in college football before, and again, we go back to that never say never mentality. But again, like we're spending 15 minutes on something that I think again is probably a done deal. But the only thing that I'm kind of hanging on to here, Matt, and again, not to feed the speculation, but I understand that I am, is if Michigan doesn't have a coach and Alabama loses on Friday, then I think it just reignites. And I think, Matt, like the weird thing, and a question I asked Nick last week is, why is there this perception that Kalen DeBoer is so available for these top jobs when he has the top job? Like, why do people think, is it just because he just got here, essentially, that he's not from here, that he would be interested in other jobs outside of Alabama? It doesn't, that's the thing that doesn't really compute to me, that once you have the job, then you're probably not available for lesser jobs.
Well, as we've talked about on this show, it's a precarious spot. This exact moment is a tough moment to ask the Alabama fan base how they feel about Kalen DeBoer potentially leaving for another job. If you ask them a week from now, they might have a completely different answer. Either way, by the way. So I think that Kalen DeBoer has look. As you said, he got the team to the playoffs. That's an accomplishment we all said needed to happen. But he has not had that season, that moment yet where I think the fan base has fully embraced him. And at Alabama, I don't know if you can have that moment short of winning a national championship. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something else that could happen, right? I mean, maybe you beat Oklahoma, you go to the Rose Bowl and you upset the number one team, right? Maybe if that happens, this fan base says, I'm head over heels. I'm all in on this guy forever. You can't tell me nothing about Kalen DeBoer. But I don't know. I mean, historically, the bar is what it is at Alabama. They put pieces of marble in the ground next to the stadium when you win a national championship. And
you got to be careful though if you're the fan base in terms of like running a guy off, you know, because
look. I mean, we can't look. And I've said this before on here too. We can't act like this fan base is a person that can make decisions on its own. It's an uncontrollable force of nature. That they are what they are. These fans need to be convinced overwhelmingly. And I will just say, I don't think they're there yet. I don't think they're far from it, but I don't think they're there quite yet. And I think people sense that. And I think if Kalen DeBoer is the guy I think he is, he's not intimidated by that. And he believes he's ultimately going to get Alabama to that point, but he's not there yet. And I think something remarkable at a higher level still needs to happen for everybody to be 1,000% on board with the DeBoer era.
Win and you're a good fit, right? I mean, that's just that's the most accurate and insightful thing I think I've heard during this entire coaching carousel run, and it's spot on. But he seems to like it here, and he seems to be winning more than he's losing, and he's knocking on the door of championship again post Nick Saban. It was never going to be easy, no matter who they hired, just to go from one coach to the next in terms of winning championships, despite the infrastructure, despite the expectations and the passion of the fan base. And Kalen DeBoer is certainly night and day from the type of coach and personality that fans were used to, but he's there. And I'm guessing he wants to do better and wants to continue to grow and make this program better in the image of what he wants to do. So give it time, and it's working so far, and we'll see what happens on Friday. Could they go in a run this year? It's possible. Not a lot of people expect it at the moment, but it's possible they could win a national championship this year. So we just got to watch them all play out. So
yeah, I think regardless of everything we just said, right? There's things that frustrate people about this guy. There's things that haven't gone perfectly. Alabama, I firmly believe, whatever it took for Greg Byrne to get Kalen DeBoer to make that statement, it was worth it. It needed to be done. You have to lock this guy down because this is an incredibly unstable time in college football. Kalen DeBoer is a proven successful coach and a proven winner. And if Alabama had to go and suddenly find another coach right now, they would be in a very, very bad spot. I'm not saying that because it's a bad program. I'm saying it's a timing issue. And Michigan losing their coach is what's put them in a very bad spot. And they are desperate right now. And I'm sure they are throwing out ungodly amounts of money to coaches that are currently employed because they know if they can't lure one of these big name guys, they are about to endure their own version of the Mike Shula era at Alabama, at Michigan.
Dark, Matt. What I would say too, though, is Matt, look, like I think that I think Kalen DeBoer is growing on people, and vice versa, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that people have this like emotional attachment to him now. Obviously, that they did Brian or Saban or Stallings, these people who are like of the place, or they were winning national championships. But that comes with winning national championships,
Yep.
And that's just going to have to grow that way. So it will happen if you give it time to happen. But at the same time, it's like if you want to go somewhere else, go somewhere else. Like if this isn't where you want to be, everybody will go their separate ways and move on and be happy, and we'll just continue and we'll. Like that's my whole thing here. It's just like be where you want to be, long term. But
I think it's in everybody's best interest in this situation for Kalen DeBoer to remain at Alabama.
That's my point, though.
Another year.
My point is that it seems like he wants to be here.
Yes.
So like at some point we just need to like accept that answer, instead of like forcing the issue in the sense that it's not acceptable just because we just want it to not be. And I don't know if that's because everybody enjoys the TV show and the entertainment
absolutely
of the carousel and for chaos to reign and for
let's be honest, a lot of people also probably not many people that watch this show. A lot of people really badly want to see Alabama have a long down period. They have convinced themselves that was going to happen for years after Saban left, and they're not quite seeing it at the level they want to see it at. And so they want that. They want to see it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I bet they think in the eyes of Alabama fans that Alabama's squirming a little bit because again, like they're scratching and clawing to get into the playoff, didn't even make it last year, but they're hanging around. And if DeBoer continues to build the program that he wants to and appears to be building, especially with strong recruiting classes, I don't see Alabama going away anytime soon as long as he's the coach. I've said here before, if DeBoer left, whatever the circumstance, I think it would set Alabama back years. And
Absolutely.
people would get what they want. But he's here, and I think that's problematic. And maybe that's why people keep throwing his name into the ring for these jobs. I don't know. All right. Well, we've got the playoff game on Friday, Matt. We'll talk a little bit more about that this week. But our thanks to Tom Green for giving us the Oklahoma perspective. And you can catch this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever. Talk to us in the comments. Leave a rating, a review out there. It really helps us. But we appreciate y'all. We appreciate the chatter. And we're not done yet this week. We'll talk soon. I've been Flanagan, and thanks to Matt Scalici. This is Beat Everyone. Thanks, everybody.